It's 4 o'clock in Los Angeles. It's 6 o'clock in Chicago. And it's 7 p.m. in New York City. Hello, everybody. Welcome to What's the Buzz, America's Best Podcast. I'm your host, the Mad Dog. I'm Mad Dog DeCipio, joined as I am each and every week by Amelia, the Pitbull Chapman. And tonight, concluding our Kennedy expose, roundtable symposium, if you will, is Dan Lazater. And I've been calling him Dan Lazater for seems like years now.
Every show.
I still said hello. Thanks,
And
Angela.
welcome back. This is
Thank
our third and final installment. Tonight we're going to call this Final Thoughts, the Kennedy Assassination, and Does History Have the Answers? Before we do that, because those are, I think those are pressing questions and probably questions that may never be answered depending on who's in charge of the answer. But last night we showed a number of photographs that I got quite a reaction
Oh, wow.
from. Yeah, oh boy, did I. Especially the one of J.D. Tippit and John Kennedy next to each other. Because, if you think that Lee Harvey Oswald, what I'm going to show you in a minute, if you think this is going to stoke the conspirators, wait, you ain't seen shit yet. So, we had I put a picture up last night, just kind of randomly, a picture of John Kennedy and J.D. Tippit. And I got to tell you something, you'd be hard pressed to say that they don't resemble each other.
Yes.
They really do. What was compelling even to forensic people, Cyril Wecht, particularly Cyril Wecht, who, in my opinion, is one of the most inquisitive, brilliant. Like, the guy is amazing. His mind goes to that other place. Cyril Wecht saw that photograph of allegedly John Kennedy's autopsy and said, "That's not the president." He said that. And so, thankfully, it's on film. And we have that for posterity. When he says that's not the president, you got a little inquisitive. How do I want to say this, Dan? Inquiring minds surely want to know.
That's what I was going to say. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yes, inquiring minds surely want to know. Who is it then if it's not the president? Well, we know now. It's J.D. Tippit, Officer J.D. Tippit of the Dallas County and Dallas, Texas Police Department. Dan, in your experiences, have you come across the name James Files?
Not familiar to me, Angelo.
James Files is a guy who claims to have been the second gunman in the Grassy Knoll. We know for sure there were two. We know that historically, we know that now, thankfully, factually, from the few records that Donald Trump was able to get out unredacted. President Trump, while he was president in office, released almost 10 million pieces of paper.
Wow.
Wait a minute, that's the scratches the tip of the iceberg. That's nothing. There are an estimated, and I found this out, I was like floored. There are an estimated 200 million pieces of paper.
What?
On the
A lot of paper.
have you heard that number before, Dan?
I don't think I have, but I can't say I specifically looked to see what kinds of volume of records. Certainly, we don't know how many records are out there, how many of them we haven't seen, and those that we have seen, we know don't tell us as much as we want to know.
Yeah. I want to show everyone tonight. We talked about the president. We talked about some of the evidence, but we didn't talk about the guy at the center of all this, a guy named Lee Harvey Oswald. If in fact his name was Lee Harvey Oswald, there is now compelling evidence, and I'm not going to say information, I'm going to say evidence to support the fact that his name may actually have been Harvey Lee Oswald and not Lee Harvey.
Hmm.
And I'll get into that in a minute. And you're going to see some pictorial evidence, if you will, if you want to call it evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it was actually. Um, let's take a look at this. Lee Harvey Oswald. What do you make of this guy?
Certainly
Any
looks
thoughts?
looks like your average high school, graduate.
Groomed.
Okay.
Yeah, very groomed, polite type person.
Okay, you ready for this one?
Mm-hmm.
Same guy, same year.
Wow.
Which one?
Well, the one to our right, I think, is him, right? He looks
You
like he's
tell
been
me.
beaten up. Yeah, I think the one on the right, and he looks like he's been beaten up by a brawl, like a beer brawl.
The one on the right is clearly the man who was brutalized by Dallas police. There's absolutely no
Yeah,
arguing that point
horrible.
whatsoever.
It was a rough arrest.
Dan Lazater,
Yeah.
your thoughts, my friend?
Well, so what year would this have been taken, and where
This
was the original photo?
1963,
So both photos were taken in 63.
as was this.
Uh-huh.
As
Well-
was all taken before November of 63, with the exception of the photo to the right here, which was taken actually on November 23rd, 1963.
His face looks fatter in this one here. Is it because it's swollen because he got beat up, or?
Well, no, they're clearly two different guys, and you're
Yeah.
going to see something right now.
Mm.
The book by George Schwimmer called Doppelganger.
Uh-huh.
If you look, you can look at a photo, and the best way to do this is to say, look at all the Elvis Presley impersonators running
That's
around.
true.
They all look like Elvis, right?
Yes.
Until you start to look at the details. Now, look at the details. Okay, clearly Lee Harvey Oswald on the right-hand side of this has more of an elongated face and a droopier jowl. The guy on the left looks very rigid, stern, looks like a military guy,
Right.
very clearly. I don't know who thought that the guy on the left here looked like Oswald, but I have to tell you that Thomas Arthur Vallee, and that's how his name is pronounced. I thought it was Vallee, but it's Vallee. Thomas Arthur Vallee was actually mistaken for Lee Harvey Oswald. I don't know how you make that mistake.
Pretty significant difference between
Oh,
the two.
absolutely.
Quite a significant difference. Keep that in mind, because you're going to see the next set of pictures, all of whom, let me be clear about saying this. Again, all of whom have been identified as Lee Harvey Oswald. There you go.
Wow.
Every one of those men have been identified as Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay? I want you to really take a look, if you're able to, look at the names. Now, the guy here in the black and white suit there,
Yes.
to me, not even close.
Not 100% close. No.
And to me, the bottom of the picture to the right, Oswald standing next to somebody who looks like James Dean.
That's what I was gonna say. Is that James Dean?
But here's the one that got me, Dan. Check this out.
What? Oh my
Again, there are at least 4 or 5 different people there all of whom have been identified as Lee Harvey Oswald.
So what is this page from?
This is from an underground website off the dark web, and I will tell you exactly what it's called. It's called deepweb.me/the Kennedy file. And that's all the info I have on it.
Yeah. Well, you can see traits of similarities in a lot of those photographs.
Mhm.
The only one, Dan, that stands out to me as different is the second row down, dead center. That guy has a wide nose and looks like he's got a wide face and mustache.
He looks more like Stalin, I think, than he does.
He looks like Joseph Stalin. Thank you.
It's like you put all those pictures together, like, whoa, how many is there?
Now, they all look like the same person.
Right.
In this picture. They're not. There are 4 different people here. These are 4 different guys. They all resemble Lee Oswald, particularly the 2 in the center who just look a hair different. And the only difference I can see is the lips. One has kind of a pointy center lip.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is more rounded. I want to pull that up and let's talk about this. Dan, put your conspiracy hat on there, brother. Tell me what you're seeing in all these pictures. Similarities, differences. Does it raise more questions than answers?
Well, I suppose there's always been speculation about, what could have been done, proxies, lookalikes, efforts to confuse. Our best spy novelists have laid out many scenarios in fiction of how protagonists get back and forth and use different images, et cetera, to escape. And so we can imagine a lot of different things. As we've seen people collect information or collect things like this, that tends to reinforce our idea that maybe something like that is plausible.
Yeah.
My orientation, as you know, has always been what I can document. The rest is speculation. These things though do raise questions for us, and they also tell us that you can't ever conclude anything directly unless you can absolutely pin down the truth of it. So whatever shadings there are, whatever suggestions and things that seem to be plausible, those can also mislead us and take us down the wrong path.
Yeah, boy. Yes, sir. It's certainly it feeds the fuel, though, and that fuel certainly lights the fire. Boy, does it light the fire! Holy shit!
Yeah.
But when you look at a photo like this here, and clearly says doppelganger, doppelganger is it's a German word, but it basically means like a mirror image. And they say if you see your doppelganger that you're going to die.
Really?
So, yeah, that's what they said. That's the myth. The German people believe that if you old school German believe that if you see your doppelganger that it's a foreshadowing of your demise. So why? My question would be, why is it not the foreshadowing of his demise?
All right.
I know these things happen because my father claimed that he saw me driving in a certain part of town in my car when I was a teenager, and I wasn't anywhere near there. But he swore up and down he saw me driving down the street. Looked just like me. He said.
I saw my sister driving a car 3 months after she passed away. Now I know it wasn't my sister, but this woman looked just like her.
Yeah.
To the point where it shook me up a bit.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at this one. This is Sam Giancana and Johnny Rosselli in Chicago a month before Dallas. About 6 weeks before Dallas. You see there a man there in that little box there. This was from a British documentary. They got a hold of this photo. I don't know how they got it, where they got it, but this was verified, documented in Chicago about 5 to 6 weeks prior to Dallas, Texas. It certainly lends credibility to the speculation that Roselli and Giancana were together. Now we know they were factually together because there's no way that this was even photoshopped.
No.
You can't even, I mean, you can look at a Photoshop picture and tell. Here's some interesting stuff. I got a lot of email response. A lot of people wanted to know about Orville Nix and his involvement here. Well, you're going to see something right now. This is frame 418. Yeah, 418. 418A. This is 418B. All right. This is from the Orville Nix film. You're looking at the moment of impact where John Kennedy got killed. That little red circle up there, that's the shooter. And you're going to see something with pretty amazing clarity in just a second, right now, in fact. This is a magnified image of what they're seeing there. You can see the muzzle blast, the police badge, the face, and apparently not even trying to hide it. There is a question for you, Dan, about this. Check this out. That's the gunman. That's the badge man. Everybody wants to call him the badge man. That's the badge man. This was the photo we saw last night.
Right.
Okay. This is a high resolution picture. There's the badge. There's the arm patch. There's the muzzle blast. Again, you can see him wearing glasses. No mistake about it. All right, talk to me. Technology is as much a friend as a foe these days, but in this particular case, regarding the Kennedy assassination, I think our technology is our friend. What do you make of this guy?
Well, it certainly is a provocative photo. I don't know quite what to make of it because you have to supply some information intellectually in order to get to the point of seeing those particular images. We always, when dealing with people who are sources and stories and have been witness to things, we always want to know, were they in a position to see what they saw, and how reliable and accurate is their identification. I do think
that's the question, isn't it? How accurate and how reliable is their information? Well, this gentleman here, it's a guy named James Files that is alive and well in a prison in Beaumont, Texas. In fact, he's in Beaumont. And he says that's him. James Files says that's him. He's the gunman. He's the guy in the grassy knoll, one of two in the grassy knoll.
So he has confessed to being the shooter, and
he told the FBI. They sat down with him. The interesting thing is, and I don't know what to make of this either, Dan, we can talk about this. The FBI could not refute what they told him, what he told them. They couldn't refute it because everything he told them checked out. Everything that he said to them checked out, including where he was, because he was seen, he was described. There are artist renditions of James Files, and he looks an awful lot like this cat right here, to be honest with you.
So, so what prompted his conversation with the FBI about this?
It was one of those literally come to Jesus moments.
Hmm.
He found himself a born again Christian in prison, as so many people do. It's funny, you have to go to jail to find Jesus.
Mm.
Funny stuff, ain't it?
Well,
I don't get it.
I covered prisons for many years, and I can tell you there's probably good reason to try to find Jesus when you're on the inside.
Yes, sir. I'm sure there is. But like a lot of people, Chuck Colson among them, found Jesus in prison.
That's right.
So James Files says that he was compelled by the Lord to tell the truth, to get it off his chest. He wanted to be clear and clean in his conscience. Well, brother, I'm going to tell you what, he's spilling every kind of bean he can spill, and implicated a whole bunch of people.
Really?
Yeah, all kinds of people.
So-
People that are still around to talk about it, in fact.
So how has his story got publicized? He got to the FBI and he made his confession, but how did that information get out into the public?
The FBI documented on video the entire interview, all 9 hours of it, and you can watch increments of it on Tubi TV. It's actually there. The first is called I Shot JFK. That's the first installment. The second installment says the man behind the fence. Behind the fence. Behind the fence, the man on the grassy knoll. Behind the fence, the man on the grassy knoll, and I shot JFK. And I encourage people.
Mm-hmm.
Go to Tubi TV. You judge for yourself. Is the guy legit? Again, keep in mind what I had said a moment ago. The FBI cannot refute him. This is the FBI's own video. It's their stuff. They recorded it for posterity's sake. And thankfully, Tubi TV got the broadcast rights. Because I think everybody else kind of like the too hot button. They don't want to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
It is a hot button issue. Why is it, Dan, a hot button issue? Why, if you've got a guy that's willing to say after all these years, I'm your man, why are you going to go, well, is he really? Don't you want somebody to confess?
Well, I think, and I've been involved in a lot of police investigations and cold case crime investigations, and I can tell you, you're always looking for the answer. But so many times there are people who will give you the answer that you want, and it turns out not to be the answer that you need.
Exactly.
So I've known and talked to people who have confessed to crimes and later on admitted that their confessions were false, or moreover have implicated other people in crimes that then when push comes to shove, they can't supply the needed information that turns into a prosecution. So,
brother, I can. Oh boy, can I identify with that? Yes, sir.
So while the FBI may not been able to refute certain things that he said, the real question for them is what they can prove. So if they can prove by the information he gives that that he was a gunman in the assassination and there was a conspiracy in which he was involved, then it's a more difficult case to make to convince a prosecutor to bring charges.
Yeah.
And otherwise, the information is investigatory and is not supposed to be leaked to the public.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk common sense here, forget the conspiracy stuff, which I'm happy to do. Forget the speculation. Let's talk about the tangible evidence. Let's talk about what we have and what we know we have. We know we have a pristine bullet that allegedly went through the president, then through Governor Connolly, and somehow magically appeared on a hospital gurney at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. That's okay. That's one pristine bullet. One. What about the two that hit the president in the head? Where are they? Where'd they come from? Nobody wants to talk about, oh, yes, it's a single lone gunman. We have the bullet. Really? I mean, what time last night do you think I was born?
Right.
Okay. I've been at this a long time. I'm not to toot my own horn, but toot. I'm a pretty smart guy. Okay. Smart enough to know that I'm being handed a line of shit when I get it. I also happen to do psychic work, and I know what it's like to tell people what they want to hear and what they need to hear. Because I had a police officer say to me in a child disappearance case, tell me what I want to hear. I said, I can't do that. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. You do what you want with what I tell you. But I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. And if you're here because you want me to tell you something, you got the wrong guy, brother. And because I do this stuff, I don't take any money. I do all of my psychic work for free. I don't take a dime for anything that I do, including this show. We don't get paid for this show.
No, we don't.
And I'm happy not to get paid for the show because I can say what and do what I want. I don't have any sponsors that thankfully I got sponsors that love it, that love what we do, and are balls to the walls, gung ho like we are, particularly Manscaped and Shopify.
Mm-hmm.
But no one's going to tell me how the narrative is supposed to be. I'm going to tell you what the narrative is. And in the case of John Kennedy, the narrative is they found a sucker, some sad sack, a patsy, if you will, who fit the bill, underachiever, lofty dreams, wants to be somebody, wants to be famous. Lee Harvey Oswald was all of that. He wanted to be all of that. There was another problem, though. Somebody else, at least one other person, looked an awful lot like him to pull this off. There's no question in my mind somebody who looked like him was involved in duck and dodge, playing interference. The guy that killed Officer Tippit, there's no way you will never convince me that Lee Harvey Oswald shot J.D. Tippit. You will never convince me of that. Your thoughts, Dan Lizotter?
Well, Occam's razor. The explanation of any complex situation is usually the one that's the least complex. But and that's something that, as I've thought a lot about what we've been talking about for the last couple of days.
Yeah.
It occurs to me a lesson that I've learned over time, which is that when you're looking to investigate an event that happened, whether it's a cold case murder or whether it's an assassination or whether it's who's running drugs out of some particular political capital, the thing that often troubles the investigation is the minutia, and the things that, while they raise your suspicion, they don't tell you anything. So the bullet does tell us something. It tells us that most likely that was placed on the stretcher. Most likely that was part of an explanation. That seems to be the logical place that we go. But, in my mind, what you have to do is stop looking at things the way other people want you to look at them.
Yeah.
Excellent point. If you put a bullet on a stretcher, it can't be explained how it could be the bullet that passed through 7 different wounds untouched.
With no blood. It
distracts you from the larger picture. And that's what I try to do when I do investigations, is I try to back up further and look at what the scenarios were at the time. You know, in writing the book, The Manchurian Journalist, and looking at the history in Dallas, you know, what I discovered was that not only was Earl Cabell mayor of Dallas at the time of Kennedy's assassination, but his brother, Charles Cabell, was fired with Allen Dulles by President Kennedy over the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah.
Charles Cabell was, during the course of November and October prior to the assassination, traveling around Texas, speaking to veterans groups and others. Yeah. And his speeches were about how we should distrust Kennedy and Kennedy's administration and their lack of fervor for anti-communism, etc. So when you back that up, and I've talked about this little storefront bank in Texas owned by Robert Story.
Yes, sir.
Had all the earmarks of non-official cover for the agency, and a place where the chief FBI, the head of the field office in Dallas, during the assassination, later went to work as a loan officer himself there. If you back up and look at these things in a larger picture, you come all the way back into history and see the tentacles that were put in place that had the capability of regime change.
Yeah.
Regime change is what I think is the larger picture that we're talking about here. Certain things, because of Kennedy's attitudes and his stepping out to do what he thought was right, and whatever his associations were and whatever his understanding about the criminal underworld, he was part of a large picture that was trying to change things in which the cultural elite who were running the show at the time were not happy with. And I think that's where you have to go with the investigation. Is higher up.
Absolutely. Well, I said it last night. Of all the places you could go to campaign, you're going to pick the one place in America, the one place in the entire country that can't stand you.
Right.
Are you serious? Like, who thought this was a good idea?
And not only that, but Dallas was a hotbed of intelligence activities.
Oh my God! Yes, sir. It was
the largest bank.
Get it?
The largest bank in Dallas, Republic National Bank, was deeply embedded with CIA activities, and their vice presidents traveling the world searching for relationships about oil. Were reporting back to the State Department on what they found and what they understood. That's tracked through history and documented.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things, Dan, that bothers me, particularly among journalists, present company excluded because you actually do your work. One of the things that really, to say it irks me would be an understatement. It unnerves me. Is that when a journalist has a solid grip on a story and then for whatever compulsive reason decides to go off the grid with that story, instead of keeping everything centered and contained, well, now we have to go to Venezuela because Lee Harvey Oswald took a shit in that hotel, and we have to go to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, because Mrs. Oswald may have gotten sick in that bathroom. But the point I'm trying to make is you don't have to crisscross the world. It's not necessary. The players are coming to us. Right. We don't need to go to them. It bothers me when I see journalists trying to divert your attention from the truth. You get what I'm going with this? And that's what they do. The FBI makes a almost daily thing of it. We're going to tell you this, but you hold on to that. But now we're going to divert your attention into something else that we want you to know. But hold on to that because you might need it someday.
Well, yeah, and sure, there are all kinds of deals and bargains made in the course of trying to build sources between journalists and the FBI, because the FBI works just as hard to build relationships with journalists as the other way around. But
Right.
and thank you for saying that, because a lot of people think that the FBI and the media have this adversarial relationship. They really don't. They work very closely with each other.
Oh yeah, especially if they can help
What
solve a
better
case.
way?
It
What
depends.
better way to promote your propaganda than to tell the press?
And the
Yeah,
proof is
you're right.
always proved by the exceptions as well, because I know that the FBI in many cases has been up to questionable activities for which they've never been held to account, and so the failure of journalists in the course of trying to keep their good source network together don't investigate what's right in front of them. That's problematic as well. So,
Amelia,
Yes.
I have been on the air for 35 minutes, and I am so sorry I have not even once brought you into this
That's
conversation.
okay, because I'm listening because of.
But you look good sitting there.
Because I was thinking to my head.
Questions for Dan. Go ahead.
I was thinking and thinking.
Questions.
Okay, somebody that confesses to his murder or his assassination, and the FBI is like, okay, yeah, you did okay. We're gonna grill you for 9 hours, but don't really do anything about it. I think it's because they'll be opening a can of worms, because they're going to be implicating more people that they were actually protecting in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, careers can be made off of being able to develop cases that no one else has been able to develop. That's a good thing for FBI agents, but you do have to be aware of the political situation, and anyone who doesn't believe that the FBI has its finger on the pulse of politics would be being misled. And while that may not translate directly into what some of the accusations are, most recently that the Justice Department is weaponized for certain purposes, always the course of investigations have led to political decisions. I have told this story before on many occasions about an investigation of which I had really good sources, and it was a program to go after payoffs that were being made to mayors throughout a particular state. And so they put together a case, and they managed to use informants to pay bribes, and they built a beautiful case. They only went after Democrats. They didn't go after any Republicans. And so when it became public that they only went after Democrats, the investigation went down the tubes.
Imagine that. Who'd have thunk? Go ahead, Neil. Question for you.
Also, too, is with all this new evidence that we have now, and especially with all the modern technology we have, do you think that they should go back into and check all the evidence again?
There have been so many different efforts to look deeper into this, and some of them congressionally led on occasion, to get a credible investigation to reinvestigate what they know, to really bring out all of the details, would be something I think a lot of people would really love to see.
Yes.
And probably a lot of people would be willing to contribute tax money to getting it done, but it would be an expensive proposition, and then is there anyone to prosecute?
It would also, Dan, I suggest, open up the proverbial Pandora's box.
Oh,
yes,
of course.
Well, because where there is truth, there is fire.
Well,
real hot fire too, Dan.
Take a look at what we think and what we believe in the context of regime change within our own country. If we believe that regime change was stimulated within, we couldn't tolerate it being stimulated from without. But if it was being stimulated within by powerful forces that were able to operate outside of exposure, I think it would be pretty devastating for us. But yet we have what arguably has been two regime changes that were both of a similar nature and raise similar questions. But the second doesn't raise as much question, because people have not probed what the journalism in the Watergate case was really all about. I think there are some serious questions there as to whether Nixon's resignation from office was the result of manipulation of
Oh my God, absolutely.
public attention and public information, and whether or not those things were caused by individuals who were interested in stopping Nixon from his own efforts toward détente in the world.
Can I tell you something? I have always had, and this is just me. I'm sorry, folks. I have always had a soft spot for Richard Milhouse Nixon, and I'm going to tell you why. I always thought even as a youngster, I'm not that young, but I remember I was 14 years old when Richard Nixon became president. And I will tell you that I always felt like he deserved better than what he got. I think that there's nothing that he did, said, or accomplished that hadn't been done, said, or accomplished by any number of his predecessors. His misfortune, singularly his misfortune, is that he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. And that was Richard Nixon's problem. He was a really good diplomat. He could sit down with any number of people and talk. And his little secret weapon, Henry Kissinger, who is still alive, unbelievable that he's still alive. This guy outlived everybody, which is kind of a scary thought, Dan. We'll talk about that as a side note. But Henry Kissinger, like, you can't kill this guy. I'm sure people have tried. But let me talk to you about a couple of moments in history that are reminiscent of regime change. In Oliver Stone's film JFK, he calls it a coup d'etat. Okay, by whom and for what purpose, Dan Lazzater?
Well, if you take a look at what history tells us about the operations, American operations, and if you listen to people like Peter Dale Scott, who's someone that I've interviewed on several occasions, former Canadian diplomat and professor at Berkeley, who's written extensively about the deep state, so to speak, or deep politics, as he calls it.
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah, we're going to do that one.
And we take a look at those kinds of issues that he and others like Joan Mellon, who's also written about the assassination, first one to link Republic National Bank in Dallas to agency activities and to help bring forward some of that information. If we look at in this context, if we look at our democracy as being very paternalistic and in a way crafted by oligarchs within this country who have had power and influence and the ability to influence institutions and political directions and things behind the scenes. I think when you look at that and you look at the distrust that these individuals who had power and were in a lead position, the distrust they had of true democracy in this country, I think then you come to a certain reasoning that these being able to use a civilian intelligence agency to serve the purposes of that state, as opposed to the democratic state that we all love and cling to, and to the constitutional freedoms that this democracy is supposed to protect. We may be tolerant of some of that paternalistic oversight, but when we come to situations like that raise questions about elected officials being able to perform the duties they were elected to perform, or whether they're interfered with by powerful institutions and individuals that are not readily apparent to us, then we see some faults in our democracy, and one of those being the fault in the American press, not to tell us the story that is true in all its messy detail.
When I was a kid, my desire when I grew up was to be Abby Hoffman's lawyer.
I never met Abby Hoffman, but I did meet Jerry Rubin once.
And, Jerry, two guys after my heart. A couple of moments that define regime change. Certainly the Kennedy assassination, 9/11 for sure. It's interesting that right before those towers came down, in fact, the day before, Secretary of State at the time, Donald Rumsfeld, said to a subcommittee, hey, folks, I'm sorry to kind of have to tell you this, but we've got $500 billion missing. We don't know where it's at. He said that, or some crazy number like that. I think it may have been more. But we were missing out of the Treasury a lot of money. And lo and behold, the next day, those towers came down, and you never heard a word from Donald Rumsfeld since.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Well, I don't have any particular knowledge about the claims, but
You can check it out on YouTube. It's all there.
I certainly can see it described as have been many things as a distraction from other problems.
It certainly was.
But if indeed that was, it certainly was a brutal and inhumane distraction.
That, my friend Dan, is what they call in war collateral damage.
Yeah.
Oops. Well, sorry, we got a couple people that died. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I was there the day before that happened, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, I was. Scary thought. Scary thought. My nephew was there that morning.
Oh my gosh.
And was out of that building 10 minutes before that plane hit.
Oh my gosh.
We oh, by the way, the airplane that hit the Pentagon wasn't an airplane, folks. It was a missile. We have the video.
Yes.
We have the missing video. And I'm going to show it on the air again, too. We've done several deep dives into the deep state. I think we've done 3 already. We're probably going to do 2 or 3 more before I get fed up with it. Or disgusted or disgruntled, whichever comes first.
Or asked again.
Yeah. But let me address something. If El Ruffian and Gigi are still in the chat, thanks to you guys and several thousand of your best friends, I guess, I am going to do the Chris Benoit show on November the 6th. Why? Because I'm going to need a distraction from the election coverage that I have to give you on Monday and Tuesday.
Let me write that down real quick.
God help us all. But yes, we have an election to cover, and I've got two nights of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just made Dan spit his coffee.
Oh, no. I was looking for my power cord to make sure I'm not ready for power.
I have it written down, November 6th.
Amelia, final questions for Dan.
Right.
Do you think that something like this happened because they were doing something else over here and say, hey, look at this distraction, we're doing something else over here?
Well, certainly as part of the intelligence community's quiver of arrows, I think distraction and the abilities to create distraction has been a tool they've used many, many times. And so what works.
Right.
In my heart, what do I want to believe happened? Do I want to deduce from the evidence that there was a conspiracy to kill Kennedy and that it went far beyond Lee Harvey Oswald? I think that I can't, in any circumstance, buy the idea of a lone gunman. I can't erase the circumstantial evidence. I can't undo the things that we know. And certainly in the environment where, in Dallas most particularly, where we had this sort of intelligence activity going on rampantly, major issues of global importance unfolding around Dallas, I think that tells us a lot. And will we ever know whether an assassination team like the one that was put together by ex-Nazi Otto Skorzeny, who was frequently in touch with the CIA, who was who was responsible for killing German scientists on behalf of Israel, who were working for Egypt back in the days after World War II. Those kinds of assassination activities existed. Those tools were used. The capabilities were there, and you have to go from there, I think, to think if it's possible, it's plausible. Is it plausible? Is it provable?
Right.
And there we are hung up on the point of contention.
Well, I'll tell you what, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, we showed you a whole bunch of pictures last night and tonight, credible pictures, all of them from the National Archive, all of them readily available at the National Archive, and most of them, thankfully, thank you to the Kennedy Library and the sixth floor museum in Dallas. We want to give them credit for most of those photos did in fact come from them. The ones that we own, that we, meaning our show, they have been noted on the broadcast as being owned by the show, including the gunman, the silhouette, and the one Amelia with all the triggers and arrows.
Oh
and
yeah,
all
with
stuff.
the diagram of
I
everything.
forget what you want to call that. Graphics. There's a word for you, graphics.
Photo with the graphics on it.
Yeah. It's the stupid stuff that I forget. The important stuff I always remember. Dan, you make me a happy guy when you're here because I have somebody to converse with.
Well, I appreciate that. I enjoy the conversations.
I will. I am going to give you a call in. Let's see, probably next. This is Wednesday. I'm going to probably call you before then. In the next few Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, I'll call you.
All right.
And you and I will sit down and work out the Robert Story story.
Right.
That's a story, brother. Let me tell you what. That's a hellacious story, and many, many ways, in a real tangible way, ties into the Kennedy assassination very profoundly.
Most certainly.
Amelia, what do we got?
Well, actually, after let's see, Monday the 28th, we're going to be talking about the simulation theory. Are we living in a simulation, or is this real life? What's going on?
Well, you look like a video game to me, so I'm going with the simulation theory.
I do? Okay. And then on the 29th at 7 p.m.
Yeah,
Eastern Time.
Donkey Kong.
You better be quiet. We're going to be talking about stuff hidden in plain sight, right in front of your nose. You didn't even see it.
That's a show that we got to get Dan. Dan, what do you know about that hiding in plain sight?
Well, I could tell you, after doing a lot of undercover investigations myself, the best place to hide is right in plain sight.
Oh yeah, especially the one that he was
when we Amelia, take note, Dan, for that show.
Okay, got it. Especially when he
keep this guy busy. I'm going to ask you a question, Dan, when we get off the air. So hang out with me for like 2 minutes.
All right.
I'll tell you what, folks.
Don't forget one more show. Tamara Thorne and Alistair Cross, the horror authors, are coming back.
Yes, and I have a couple things to say to Gigi and Ruffian and Captain Miserable, Amelia's boyfriend. We are going to give you the show you want. So there's Gigi. Can you do a Chris Benoit? Yeah, we can do a Chris Benoit show. Sure. Why not? We're going to do that November the 6th. That's going to be my election special distraction show. I need that. I'm going to use that show to vent. Here's a case for you, Dan. A professional wrestler by the name of Chris Benoit. Allegedly, we have to say allegedly. Because there's substantial evidence to prove otherwise. That allegedly killed his wife and son and then commits suicide purportedly in his home gym. That was the belief until investigators started working and said, maybe not so fast with this. So here it is now, 18 years, almost 18 years later, and we're still talking about a dead professional wrestler and who killed him. Did he kill his wife, or were they all taken out as a result of a bad drug deal gone bad? Business, crisscrossed business, double crossed business, however you want to say it. His wife was into some bad shit. You know that, Amelia.
Oh yes, yeah.
So
Everybody
did
was
his
talking about
wife
that.
get them all killed? Did he have any clue? And what about the voices heard on his open cell phone in his house the night of the murder / suicide / setup mob hit, as it were? We are going to go down that fucking rabbit hole once again.
Like for
Hopefully for the
the
last time.
9th or 10th time, if I counted correctly.
Oh my God, please! But they can't get enough of this Benoit. It's like the Kennedy show.
Mhm.
Those are the two most requested shows we get. It's crazy. Can
And
you
the
do
Marilyn
Chris
Monroe.
Benoit? Can you talk about President Kennedy?
Hmm.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
For the 11th or 12th time.
And
Sure,
we
why
did that
not?
about Marilyn Monroe too, remember? We had a lot of
Oh,
requests on
Marilyn,
that.
wait a minute. I had some pictures provided to me by some people. Legit pictures of Kennedy and Marilyn, very intimate. I got in trouble for showing them on the air, and I promised I wouldn't do it again. I would be a good boy on that regard because I don't want to fuck with these people.
Marilyn's personal carpenter was a friend of mine, and he was a fine woodworker, and he built furniture and remodeled the inside of her house.
Oh wow.
So he had.
I'll go one with you, okay? I had an hour-long conversation with Joe DiMaggio about Marilyn. I met Joe DiMaggio in Atlantic City, New Jersey. It was called the Greatest Sports Legends Banquet. I got to meet Joe DiMaggio and my childhood hero, Bruno Sammartino. I don't know if you know who that person is.
I know.
He is the longest reigning wrestling champion in world history. 11 years undefeated. Nobody beat Bruno.
No.
Nobody beat Bruno. And then Hulk Hogan came along.
Yeah.
Anyway, folks, I'll tell you what, I love doing these kind of shows for you. And I love bringing you intellectual people, hard-hitting people like Dan Lazater. Dan is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. He is an amazing intellect. He's got this mind that just doesn't quit. Remarkable, remarkable guy. Well, till we see you again,
Yeah.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise, we will be back with you on Monday evening, and we'll have some fun, all right? And if we don't have fun, we'll beat Amelia up. Folks, listen, take care. God bless you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Come on, let's go. There you go. Come on. Go home. Go.